5-minute characters.
How's it going?
Did you bring the taser?
Yeah.
Good. Too slow to answer?
We met here 4 years ago.
You as well. Hopefully she gets a $100 a year job, right?
I was crazy enough to run one. They called me last year for one. They couldn't get me to run. I said, I have a job. I can't do that. Maybe you'll lead to other things. I said, I don't know where to go. Elected position that pays. Nothing to about the money, but who can afford to run? Your job is flexible. Yeah, retired. I ran when I was in college. Think of that. I won my whole course schedule. If I took it seriously. Oh, okay. They only fill a seat if they have to. You probably have to push them over. It's like depending on what. But depending on when the 2 years the vacancy happens,
yeah. Well, but that's not considered a vacancy. You're just not going. Yeah.
it's good for ball.
Yeah.
I didn't know for sure it was something on your car last night.
Oh, really?
It's like, I don't know if it's definitely her or not, but I'm available for it.
Oh, do you? What do you have for a Volvo?
I had a 60 at the time.
We almost got, that was actually when we put our down payment on, it was on an F60 and we had to call them and change our
The
mind.
last one had 250,000.
Nice. Where do you get your Volvos from?
Well, they turn on. Fiance just got it.
Hi, Jack. Matt and I set up a mutual support. Yeah. Can I leave my water in my car? I left my water in my car.
There's some in the cooler though.
It sounds like he's just bare minimum.
So you bid on it?
Well, I kind of
I know, but
Yeah, you're right.
Just ask me.
Everybody knows I'm not.
Well, I think actually like I had a couple of my house jobs, and they said, well, how do we switch the ceiling fan? And they said, well, how do we switch the direction? And they said, well, you just hit it with the, well, like, they whacked it off of the ceiling. Like, I didn't mean, with every bone in your, every muscle in your body, like, touch it, just a little plastic switch. Slight matter of degree.
Yeah, no, but all of a sudden, it's really fast. Like I went someplace we were together and I was like, no, so it can be I just wanted like, so there you go, there I am. There it is. That's the driveway. Oh, excellent. I don't know. They weren't in the office. Oh, really? Oh, yes. Where do you live? I don't really know. Right under the bell. You'll see the sign. I did. That's my bed. Hard right. Miniature.
We'll be starting in 2 minutes.
I want a broad and I want to be this way.
Just gonna get down.
Why does this keep? Have you checked to see
I'm thinking once the selectmen finish your questions, so we move to the audience, we hand your microphone over. Is it there, you want me to do something after? Now, where do you come down?
We have a microphone.
No, it's just for you guys.
Oh.
So when they're done asking their questions,
John.
All right. Welcome to, turn it off.
There you go.
Well, welcome everyone to Troy's Candidate Forum 2024. We're going to, how it's going to be set up, Selectmen will do a series of questions for the candidates, and then we'll move to public. Questions will be directed to everyone. First question will start with the first person, everyone has a chance to answer. The second question will start with the second person, and then come back to the first. This gives everyone a chance to answer. You can choose to pass if you so wish. I think it'd be the fairest way to do it. We'll probably start off with having the candidates introduce themselves, if they want to say a quick thing, and then we'll move to the selectmen's questions.
So,
Hello. So, I'm Dick Thaxton. I've represented Troy and Fitzwilliam in the legislature for the last two years. I guess I can say that the things that I think are important for me as a legislator are no broad-based income tax, no sales tax. I find, in Cheshire County at least, the county tax situation is basically runaway, and that needs to change. The way that school taxes are allocated throughout the state is a problem, and that certainly needs to be addressed. I think it's more important that individuals take responsibility for raising their families and controlling the lives of their children than the state. Maintaining the rule of law, following due process are critical to maintain our society as we know it. I think that it's important to understand that in these two towns, through our efforts, we brought back 40,000, I'll put my glasses on to get the number right. For Fitzwilliam, $40,437 for bridges. For Troy, an additional $39,321 for bridges. Fitzwilliam, an enhanced rooms and meals tax payment of $55,026. For Troy, an enhanced rooms and meals tax payment of $48,000. $48,047.33 to be exact. I believe that I consider my term in the legislature successful. I sponsored 8 bills, 5 of which have been signed into law. Of the bills that I sponsored, of the ones that passed, the one that I'm the proudest of, or I think was the best bill, was HB 1125, and that was a bill that required counties allow members of the public to comment at county meetings. Prior to passage of that bill, it was not required. The county meetings were public, but it was not required that the public be allowed to speak. And this was a bipartisan bill because some places they wouldn't let Democrats speak, and some places they wouldn't let Republicans speak. So I think that was wrong. And honestly, the bill that I'm the saddest about not passing was one that I co-sponsored with Barry Faulkner from Swansea with regard to the charging stations for electric vehicles. The bill was tabled. I think that particular bill, I own an electric vehicle, so I guess I had some sense for this. But many times you'll have an electric vehicle and go to a charging station and you'll find it's blocked by a non-electric vehicle, just because. And I think that is wrong, and I think that should not be permitted. So that's my happy spot, my sad spot, if you will. I think most importantly, my philosophy that I have developed, having gone over to Concord now for 2 years, is the following. If you liked New Hampshire when you walked in the door this morning, then if you walked out of the door this afternoon and nothing else changed, you'd still like New Hampshire. I don't believe that we need to make massive changes on a systemic basis in New Hampshire. I think that fine points and small amounts of tuning are important and good. We want to stay current, but at the end of the day, I like New Hampshire. I like the way we run our state. It's proven to be successful, and I'd like to keep it that way. So that's my part.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming out tonight. I'm Angelo DiBernardo, better known as Skipper, and I'm running for the county commissioner's position. I've lived in New Hampshire all my life. Most of it was in Keene. I spent the last 18 years in Swansea. When I was in Keene, I did serve on the city council for 9 years, and thought the importance of contributing is what had driven me to that. And now, the same deal. It's important that we all participate, and that's why I'm basically running. I'm a conservative. I'd live within my means. I think the government should do that also. If people really want a lot of the other programs that are available, they can go back to Massachusetts or Vermont or wherever. But New Hampshire, I think, should remain unique as it is and pay our bills as we go along. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to Troy for hosting this forum. I'm Denise Ricciardi. I've been your state senator for the last 4 years, and I have to tell you, it has been an honor and a pleasure to serve you. I always say, it's not my seat, it's your seat. I work for you. I have been known to be the problem solver. I find a problem, I fix it, and I get results that improve the quality of your life here in New Hampshire. Some of those priorities are Senate Bill 99. That was to return the Meals and Rooms revenue sharing back to the cities and towns. It was a broken promise for 2 decades. The state of New Hampshire promised to give you this money for property tax relief. And I don't know about you, but I don't like broken promises. So not only did I fix it, and it's millions of dollars coming back for property tax relief, but now the funds go in a dedicated fund, not in the general fund. What does that mean for you here in Troy? You are getting another $202,000 for property tax relief. That is an 85% increase since I introduced the bill 4 years ago. This money would not be coming to you for property tax relief if I had not sponsored and championed that bill. Another problem that I saw was I had a lot of constituents tell me they have problems getting access to their health care because of prior authorization. So your doctor may say you need an MRI, and the insurance carriers can take months to fulfill that. Well, again, I don't think that's right. I think you should be in charge of what your doctor thinks you need. So I made it my mission to fix it. Whenever people laugh at me and say, you can't fix that, you'll never get that done, I always say the worst thing you can do is tell Denise she can't do something. You have a problem, give it to me and I'll fix it. And as a result, the governor has just signed into law, starting in January, those carriers have 7 days to respond or it's an automatic approval. And there'll be a lot more transparency in your health care. One of my other most proudest moments is everything I've done for moms, children, and families. I championed and sponsored a bill that affectionately got coined Momnibus. It helps with maternal care, it helps with mental care issues, it helps with child care, getting people back in the workforce, and it's one of my proudest moments. And in fact, for next session, I'm already working on Momnibus 2. I want to touch on education funding. It is vital that we support public education. We have done $169 million extra dollars over and above the $127 million that we did in the last budget. I have some of my smaller towns like Troy where we need educational fairness, okay? So I championed for some of my smaller towns to get more funding per pupil. So the average student in New Hampshire from the state funds is about $7,400. But here in Troy, because of my championing for you, each student here gets $9,800. that also helps save on property taxes. So I'm very, very proud of that. I also support choice for moderate and low-income families, because I think everybody should have the same educational opportunities as affluent families. It has truly been an honor to be here and serve you. I also, if I could, I would like to touch on some misinformation. I want to make this very clear to you. There's misinformation that we have a ban on abortion. We don't have a ban on abortion. Let me make it perfectly clear that we have accessible abortion for any reason up to the end of 6 months. At the 7th, 8th, and 9th, there are restrictions for fetal anomaly or the health of the mother. Misinformation and fear-mongering for votes is not fair. I give women a lot more credit. I think we're strong individuals. So don't take my word for it. You can go to Planned Parenthood where it says you have safe, accessible abortion. I also want to say that I work in a very bipartisan fashion. I believe politicians should not try to be right, but they should do what's right. I really believe that, and I have served you and have an open door policy, and I thank you for that, and I'm asking you to vote for my re-election on November 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you to the Troy Selectmen for having us this evening. I am Jennifer Rhodes. I am the current representative for Cheshire County District 17, which is Winchester, Richmond, Swansea, Troy, and Fitzwilliam. This is my finishing up today at Veto Day. It is my second term. I serve you as the Vice Chairwoman of the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. Additionally, I serve on the Governor's Highway Commission with Councilor Wheeler. Currently, we're working on 2 bridges for the town of Troy and Run and Swansea. I also serve on the County Executive Delegation Committee, and because I see firsthand what horrible, horrible consequences that some youths make, those have devastating consequences at a very young age. I sit on the Juvenile Justice Restorative Panel at the County of Keene. If an officer is to arrest a youth and they think that that person would maybe do better going in front of this panel and trying to right their wrong instead of going to juvenile court, they're offered that opportunity. They're given a contract by us. They have to fulfill that contract, or they're back out and they have to go in front of the judge and, you know, face those consequences that they may have. I also serve as an alternate on the Winchester Planning Board, and in my spare time, I enjoy beautifying the landscape at our county nursing homes. I work as a teacher at the Winchester School District. I see firsthand what the community and the teachers face every single day. And I decided to run for re-election because after hearing everybody's concerns, after continuing to come to the selectmen meetings, make myself available in all the towns, I decided I want to continue representing you. I want to continue making New Hampshire be the safest state in the entire nation and make it a place to continue living. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Dave Wheeler. I was your state senator for 6 years, and I've been your executive counselor and still am for 14 years. With me today is my wife Joy in the back there. We've been married 44 years, and I couldn't do this without her support. I just couldn't serve in government. We have 4 children and 2 foster children. They're all grown now, and we have 12 and a half grandchildren. Thank you. My wife and I, we operate several small businesses. We have Maranatha Carpet, a flooring business, and our son is in this business with us. We also have Miracle Acres Tree Farm, and we are growing about 10,000 cut-your-own Christmas trees over in Milford. And we also do maple syrup, have an apiary, and My wife has almost 100 chickens. So I like what they make for the eggs, but the other stuff that the chickens make, I don't like. Anyways, we've experienced firsthand by running these businesses. We've experienced what 22% inflation that we've had to deal with over the last 4 years. We've also experienced government overreach and excessive regulations when we're selling and installing mobile homes. It can be quite difficult dealing with all those. I'm not in the legislative branch anymore. This is the executive branch. So we serve with the governor. I like to tell the school kids when they tour the State House, the legislators here put the money in the bank, and the governor and the executive council take the money out of the bank, and we try to get the best buck for the taxpayers. So I'll save the more details for later.
Thank you. Thank you again for hosting us tonight. My name is Matthew McLaughlin. I'm running for New Hampshire State Senate in District 9. A little short bio about myself. I was born and raised in Bedford. I was the youngest of 10 children, 5 boys, 5 girls. I went to school at the U.S. Naval Academy. After graduating, I became a Navy pilot. I served 8 years doing 3 deployments on the USS Nimitz. Why am I running? To put it simply, I think the Republican positions in this state are extreme, and I think my opponent is in lockstep with them. For the last 4 years, the Republicans have had all the keys to the castle. They've had the House, the Senate, and the governorship. So anything they have wanted to do, they have been able to do. So let's take a look at what they've done and who have been the largest beneficiaries of their policies. On taxes, they cut the interest and dividends tax. That has benefited the 1,400 wealthiest families in the state of New Hampshire. They've reduced the business profits tax, and again, that benefits the multinational corporations that do business in New Hampshire. Who makes up for this lost revenue? It's you and me who are sitting in this room with our property tax. Let's see. On education, they passed a divisive concepts law. This is just a way to attempt to sanitize U.S. history. They're basically saying, let's not talk about or teach about any times in our history when we have come up short on our founding principles. The voucher scheme. This program takes basically state dollars and it sends them to private schools, religious schools, or home schools. It has zero accountability. The state education department will not share any data with the legislature. Got to do this either with glasses or without. Let's see here. One partial audit found that there was a 25% error rate on enrollees, such as not using tax forms to validate their income, but using pay stubs. Once a person is in the program, they never look at the family income again, and in every legislative session, they've tried to raise the income cap for the voucher program. This current season, we have 31 Republican legislators who have filed a brief on the Claremont lawsuit asking the state Supreme Court to overturn the Claremont decision. They want the New Hampshire Supreme Court to do to Claremont what the U.S. Supreme Court did to Roe v. Wade. On a woman's right to choose, my opponent did vote for an abortion ban for a New Hampshire woman. This makes New Hampshire the only state in New England with a restriction on abortion. I do know that our current restriction is not the most restrictive in the country, but in each legislative session, a new and more restrictive limit has been proposed. So I'm confident that she would vote with her party if a more restrictive policy came forward. On climate policy, New Hampshire lags all of our New England peers in renewable energy goals. Massachusetts' renewable energy goal is 60% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. Maine's looking for 80% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Vermont's goal is 100% by 2035. New Hampshire's goal is 25% by 2025, and it never goes up from there. This is simply because it has not been a priority of the governor or of the Republican legislature. On gun laws, in the last session, the New Hampshire State Senate voted against a 3-day waiting period to buy a gun. Gun-related suicides can be reduced by 50% when you have a waiting period. With us losing 22 veterans a day to suicide, anything we can do to help stop this is worth doing. And on assault weapons, I think assault weapons are a military-grade weapon that do not belong in the hands of civilians. Even the military stores these weapons in an armory when a soldier comes home from deployment. Cannabis, again, we're the only state in New England that does not allow recreational use of cannabis. This costs us lost tax revenue, which could be used to improve education or housing or healthcare. And just today, my opponent voted to sustain a veto by Governor Sununu allowing the alternative treatment centers to operate additional cultivation centers, including growing in a greenhouse. This bill would have lowered the cost to New Hampshire citizens who do use therapeutic cannabis. And the funny thing is, she actually voted for this bill in May. So those are some of the reasons I'm running. The policies of the New Hampshire Republican Party, I think, are too extreme. I think they're in lockstep with the national agenda, which has been dominated by Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, Americans for Prosperity, American Legislative Exchange Council, the Free State Movement, Koch brothers, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for your time.
Hi, everybody. I recognize a lot of faces in the audience. It's nice to see everyone. My name is Kristen Tilton. I am a resident in Troy. For those of you who don't know, I live right up the street. I serve as on the board of trustees of the Gate Kimball Library, and I'm also a member of the trustee of the trust funds. I was an advisory member on the Troy Broadband Committee, which helped bring internet access to all the residents in Troy. And I am the editor of the trustee monthly newsletter, formerly known as the Troy Town News, the Troy Communicator. I was born in Peterborough. I grew up all around the area before settling with my longtime partner and building our house here with the help of family and friends. We have a 12-year-old daughter. She attends public school. She just got into 7th grade. And Matt took most of the policy discussion that I was going to have, but I'm keenly focused on the taxes that the state has cut, which would otherwise benefit our property taxes, especially with the ongoing crisis of the water and sewer department. The state used to help fund those types of initiatives for towns, and I really think that that's something that we could really use at this time. So I won't go into many of the other things. As I said, Matt covered a lot of the state funding shifting, the tax cutting, the school voucher program, and I'll just look forward to the questions that we might get from the selectmen. Thank you.
Hi everybody, thank you all for coming. It's good seeing you here tonight. My name is Jack Gettins. I'm running for state representative. I've lived in Troy for 39 years. My long-term partner and I, Kate, live up on West Hill. I am on the planning board and the Monadnock Regional School District Budget Committee. So this is, I haven't been a state representative before, but I think I have the experience that would allow me to get going on the job and contribute soon. And why I think that is, back in the 1990s, I was the director of the Division of Family Assistance in the Department of Health and Human Services. That's the division that runs the state welfare programs for families, for elderly, for people with disabilities, as well as the state food stamp program, child care eligibility, and Medicaid eligibility. So in that job, I got a lot of experience with state government policies, dealing with the federal government, meeting with legislators, drafting regulation rules. A lot of the things that a legislator would do, I was involved with, not as a voting legislator, but as a member of the executive branch in government. So I think I can find my way around Concord. I have things to learn, but I think I can do it. In running, I had to think about, well, what am I running for? Why? What do I want to get to do? And you really want to reflect on what a wonderful state we live in and how great the state of New Hampshire is. In a lot of the rankings about states, New Hampshire is up there on all the good qualities. We're first in child well-being. We have the lowest poverty rate. We have very low rates of violence, very low rates of gun crimes. Across the board. So we're very proud to be in the state, and as Representative Thaxton said, the state is doing well. But there are things that need to be addressed. And one that I would like to address is the cost of living. The cost of living has gone up a lot, and it doesn't affect us all equally. If you're a bit older, maybe you own your house, or you've got a mortgage rate that's low, maybe you own a little stock, bonds, have a savings account, things are going okay. Stock market's up, house prices are up, things are going fairly well. If you're a young family just starting out, trying to pay for childcare, trying to buy a house, pay your electric bill, things are quite expensive. And I think we can do some things with our state government to support our young families to get ahead. And I would prioritize that. The other two things I want to work on, tremendous inequities in education across the state. Some schools do very well, some schools not so well. I think we need to help out those schools that aren't performing well. Also, tremendous inequity in tax rates across New Hampshire. We base so much on property taxes, some communities end up paying relatively low tax rates, others much higher rate. I would like to work on that as well. Very much looking forward to the night. I don't know if I thank the moderator and the town for putting this on, but I think it's a wonderful event, and really looking forward to it.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll move to start questions of select board. Try to keep answers around 1 to 2 minutes. Let's not go too long. And then once select board is done, we'll move to the public.
My first question is for the candidates for state district number 12. And I'll direct this first to the incumbent, Representative Thaxton. Do you think that New Hampshire's gun laws are okay as they are now, or would you work to change them?
I don't know if you want to leave that down there if you can all hear me. My answer is very simple.
The TV may not hear you.
That was bad.
Microphones get close to each other.
Hi. The answer to my answer to Alan's question is, the question was, do you think New Hampshire's gun laws are okay as they are now, or do they need revision? My opinion is that based on, as Jack said earlier, we don't have a lot of gun violence in this state. I don't think there's an issue here. It may be because we're a rural state, or at least largely rural state. So my answer is, I'm not looking for either an expansion of, I wouldn't make guns more accessible. I don't think that's an issue. And I don't see any immediate need to make our gun laws more restrictive.
Thank you, Mr. Gittens. Jack.
So thank you. I think I look at it from a gun safety perspective. We are the third lowest in the country in terms of gun violence. But we do have, I think it's about 150 deaths a year associated with guns. The majority of those are suicide. So that's a safety issue. And how do we try to prevent that? Any death due to guns, every death is too many. And as Mr. McLaughlin stated, 3-day waiting periods can have a big effect on suicide. So I think we should seriously look at that. In addition to gun safety, I would certainly be willing to look at protective orders, what's sometimes called red flag laws, as long as they're done well. You know, it has to be due process. You can't let everybody make a claim. It has to be done very carefully, but I think that can be effective. And where it can be effective is we have low rates of gun violence now, but the country has a problem with mass shootings and school shootings. And how do we address those? And protective orders might be a piece of that puzzle. And I think we need to get together with everybody and figure out how to make our children safe and make it so our children aren't afraid in their classrooms. So I think it's guns, it's not a control issue, it's a safety issue.
Why don't we answer in line, so first question should be Dick, and then you'd be second to answer all the way down to Jack. So if you want to answer, we'll go down. So the second question would be the second person in line, and everyone goes through.
I thought his question was specifically for those two.
Yeah, well, I want to try to give everyone a chance.
See if everybody else wants to answer.
Yeah, see if everyone else wants to answer, but I want to make sure we keep the order going, so when we get to the other questions, we've got a flow going.
You said it was only for the District 12 candidates.
I know
You
that.
might have other questions for the. No?
I was under the impression that I could direct the questions to specific candidates. Apparently, that was not the case.
Yeah. That's to prevent targeting, you know, a single person gets, you know, or two people. I want to make sure everyone can answer questions, you know, I want to keep the flow going. We had a couple issues last time where one person kept getting answers and no one else could talk.
So let's go ahead and continue down the line then. We'll start back over here. Same question.
That's close to the other microphone.
In regards to the current gun laws, I don't see a problem with them. I think the biggest problem is with the court system not enforcing the gun laws. Too often, the issue of misuse of weapons isn't even prosecuted. One of the recent criminals that were sentenced this year was convicted of a felon in possession of a weapon, but the sentence he received was concurrent with another sentence. So in effect, he wasn't punished at all. I think if we just enforce the laws, we'll be better off.
New Hampshire has once again been voted safest state in the nation because we don't restrict people's constitutional rights, because we don't defund our police. That's very important. States that have red flag laws are where we are seeing a lot of these shootings. I do not want to see any violence of any sort, but people who will follow the laws, when you take someone's constitutional rights, then they won't carry their guns. But bad people, criminals, will. Then women don't have a way to protect themselves. So we will continue to be the safest state in the nation by empowering our police, not defunding them. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. That particular bill came through our committee, and one of the concerns that we have is, are you going to tell a woman that she has to wait 3 days before she can defend herself? And there was conversation about there was going to be a form to fill out, but we never saw that form. But that form didn't say, you know, hey, sign here if you feel your life is in danger. It didn't say who you're going to give this form to. It didn't say who was going to be the one to make this decision. Additionally, we have heard by everybody here that we are the safest state in the nation. That is true. That is thanks in part to the laws that we do have. But something else that is very interesting, we keep on hearing about deaths by suicide. So after we're hearing that it's bad that we don't have a 3-day waiting period because people are committing suicide, those same people voted to allow assisted suicide. That's all I have to say.
Well, I can't vote on any of these policies as an executive counselor, but I will give you my opinion on them. There's no empirical evidence that 3-day waiting periods reduce suicides. It's just not true. And every single so-called assault weapons ban piece of legislation that we've seen in the State House is not a ban on a military, fully automatic gun. It's the same firepower as your nice hunting rifle with a nice polished wooden stock. It's just black and scary looking, and it's a semi-automatic. These people won't stop. They're trying to take your hunting rifles and any rifle that shoots more than 5 rounds or whatever. People need these for self-defense, and they can't prove empirically that people would not be harmed if these were gone. People need to be able to defend themselves. The red flag laws that we've seen at the State House, all of them eliminate due process. Anyone can make an accusation against someone else and the police will show up to take your firearms and then try to figure it out later. That means that person could be innocent and has lost their right to self-defense in the meantime, and then they gotta go beg to a judge to get their rights back. You shouldn't have to beg to have your rights. I will say, as an executive counselor, I've worked hard on the instant check gun line. When you buy a handgun in New Hampshire, the state police are the ones that do that background check. And if you buy a long gun in New Hampshire, the federal government does the background check. We've worked hard to make that gun line as close to instant as possible for background checks. And when we've had a problem with mistaken identities, different names, people get delayed or denied with the federal system about 11% of the time. In New Hampshire, that's only 1% of the time, because we have people who want to get it done. For instance, if you have a simple assault, if that simple assault is on a family member, that's a prohibitor. You can't have a firearm. But if it's not on a family member, then you can have a firearm, and that's the type of research our state police do. If you have a DWI and it's DWI drugs, that's a prohibitor for 1 year, but a DWI alcohol is not. And sometimes the judges or the police don't write down which one it is, and so that has to be researched. And we want that right here in New Hampshire. The FBI does it. You have to send in your photograph, your fingerprints, and wait 6 to 9 months to get those type of things straightened out and be disarmed in the meantime.
Thank you. I'm going to disagree with Councilor Wheeler on the effects of the 3-day waiting period. I do think it does reduce suicides. I know of 2 cases here in New Hampshire where a person who committed suicide had the receipt for the gun in their pants pocket. Assault weapons, AR-15s are a military-grade weapon. It does everything an M16 does except shoot on automatic. It also carries magazines that have 30 rounds per magazine. In Newtown, Connecticut, the shooter went into the school, shot 154 rounds in 4 minutes. The power of the assault weapon is so much greater. It's got about 5 times the gunpowder than a 9mm bullet, and it just is that much more powerful. It's designed to really, on a battlefield, really not just kill, but totally maim the victim of the gun. As a matter of fact, if you listen to or read about ER room doctors, a bullet hole from a 9mm, the entry and exit wound are roughly the same size. On an assault weapon, an AR-15, the entry wound is about the size of a quarter, and the exit wound is about the size of a small dinner plate. So Lewiston, Maine had shooters last year. We can't wait for a mass shooting in New Hampshire to ban assault weapons. And the 3-day waiting period, red flag laws. As far as the one thing I heard about if somebody needs a gun today because they feel threatened, they can override a 3-day waiting period by going to their local police office, and that easily can be administratively handled to get a gun on the day you want to purchase it if you really need it. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I recognize that private gun ownership is a deeply rooted tradition in America. However, our problem in the United States, and it's a uniquely American problem, is that as of September 30th, 575 people have been killed and almost 2,000 people have been wounded in 482 mass shootings. That's a problem. No matter what side of the Second Amendment versus regulation argument you're on, can we all agree that there are certain people that guns should be unavailable for? They should be unavailable to children. At least 157 people were killed in unintentional shootings done by children last year. Firearms also have killed more children and teens than any other cause, including car crashes and cancer, according to Johns Hopkins. They should be unavailable for anybody to access and steal, and they should be unavailable to anybody having a mental health crisis. I know we're very divided rather. I don't think that in my lifetime there's ever been a serious conversation with reasonable discussions about how to reduce the toll and horror of gun violence while making it more difficult for the people we don't want to have guns and not having a burden for people who can have guns. And I think that we can sit down and have that conversation. I am in favor of legislation for responsible gun ownership. I don't want to defund the police, and I don't want to take away anybody's guns when they have a perfectly fine reason to have them. That's it.
So this will be directed to everybody since I'm not allowed to direct it specifically. Just about nobody likes the way schools are being funded in New Hampshire today. How would you work to change the way we fund our schools?
We'll have to start on side. We'll just keep the microphone back and forth, so Jack, you're up next.
Yeah, so we fund schools primarily through property taxes. And as you know, we've had the Claremont decision that the state never fully embraced. And then we had the Condell decision that upped the ante. And then now, as I understand it, the Speaker of the House is filed an amicus brief to try to get rid of all of that. So I think we need to move away, if we can, from property-based funding. It's just a mess. If you look at, for example, the inequity in taxes, if you look at Rye, fairly affluent community, their equalized tax rate is $5 per thousand. You look at Claremont, their equalized tax rate is $25 per thousand. A five-fold difference between two communities in the same state. If you look at the Rye proficiency in math, 75% of the students are proficient. You look at the proficiency in Claremont, 20%. We've got to equalize this somehow. And we have to get a bit away from property tax as funded, and we have to have more funding coming directly from state government. State government has a lot of different revenue sources other than a broad-based income tax. A lot of our revenue comes from the Liquor Commission, from the lottery, from taxes on business and industry. We need the state government to fund a higher portion of education and take some of the burden off of the tax. And then I think we'll be in a much better situation.
As I mentioned, I just had a daughter start 7th grade in public school. I think that New Hampshire funds our public education disproportionately to other states in the nation. I think we have one of the lowest funding per child in the nation, and we could definitely improve that. As Jack mentioned, and I have some literature up here in case anybody wants to read it, one of the ways that we fund state education is by property taxes, and it is disproportionate the way that the affluent towns raise the monies and the lower property rich towns raise money. If the more property rich town gets a surplus, they get to keep that. And whereas Troy wouldn't be so property rich, we have to supplement that those education dollars with our property taxes. I don't support the education freedom accounts, which are also known as vouchers for children going to religious or private or homeschool situations. I don't think that there's enough accountability in those situations, and I don't think that the people who benefit from it are sending their children to super expensive private schools. I think that most of the people who were already sending their children and could certainly afford to send their children to private schools are and didn't need that money are now benefiting from it, and it's costing us a lot of money. The other thing is the homeschool situation where there's little to no accountability and there's no testing requirements. I really think that for curriculum purposes and to make sure that our kids are actually being educated in the way that we're told, there should be some accountability. So at the end of the day, an increase in our public school education dollars, it benefits everybody in the community. We want to have smart kids. We want them to go through an entire education system, come out on the other end, and benefit our communities. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think for my position, the way to increase state aid to education is we have to invert the formula. Right now, the statewide education property tax pays roughly 20% of a typical town's per student budget, and the town property tax pays the rest. I think we need to invert that, get the state paying about 75 to 80%, and the way I would propose to do it is to take that statewide education property tax, which generally works to equalize all the property in the entire state of New Hampshire. It basically makes the whole state one zone for assessing property, and make a tax rate that would raise the money and send it to every town. And so that's how I would try and propose to do it, because one thing I know, you can't mention the words income or sales tax here in New Hampshire. So we tax property. So that's what I would do, is make the whole state one, the statewide education property tax pay a lot more.
Thank you. I hear a lot about money being tossed around here, but I don't hear much about quality, and I don't hear much about parental choice and parents being able to educate their child in a setting where that child can be educated best. For full disclosure, my wife and I have homeschooled all 4 of our children through high school. We have an attorney who graduated from Nashua Community College with his paralegal degree, the top of all the programs, went on to law school, and when he graduated, he was top of the class in law school, and he was home educated. So accountability is in the results. I'll give you homeschooler after homeschooler that will kick the butt of public school students every day. They are accountable. Why are they doing it? Why are the parents sacrificing the second income in most of the cases to have mom stay home and help homeschool while dad brings in the income in most cases? They make that sacrifice. They care about their kids more than anyone else in the public school. So it really is upsetting when someone says homeschoolers are not accountable, because they are, and we'll show you the results day after day.
Thank you for the question. So this biennium, we allocated $127 million for school funding, and then we allocated an additional $169.1 million on top of the already allotted money. So let's talk about what we've been hearing about schools or homeschools failing. It's unfortunate that there are some schools right here in Cheshire County that are failing. I'm not going to stand here and mention these, but I'm certainly welcome to have a conversation with anybody whenever we're done here, and I can give you the details on that and what the school is doing in order to turn around those scores. I can assure you that they have not been defunded. So if we're going to defund a homeschooler because their test scores are bad, does that mean we have to defund an actual school because theirs are? I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. Additionally, I do work in a school, as I mentioned earlier, and I can assure you, I see children every single day that for whatever reason it is, that particular building is not the best place for that student. It's not working. We have students that we send to what's called out-of-district placements. We send them to those school districts to get their education because their particular home school is not best for them. They are not getting educated, their needs are not being met. I'm not really sure why we are so focused on a particular building instead of the actual education. As an educator, I genuinely care about the education. I don't care where or what building they actually get it in. May I have that back for 1 second? Sure. My apologies, thank you. Representative Thaxton and I have had many conversations actually about this particular conversation, and many of the people that spoke are correct. This side of 93, we are getting shafted. We do not have the infrastructure like they have over the other side of 93. I would like to see us go back to, can we have some of the money back that we're paying when we go shopping over there? Because we don't have a JCPenney over here. The Claremont decision is a big issue. I do think we have to wait and see what actually comes out of that. But as Representative Thaxton and I have mentioned many times, it would be very nice if we could get all of our representatives in this county to actually sit down and come up with a bill that we come up with together to try to get some money from Bedford. Thanks.
Okay, so what the judge ordered was $536 million to fund an educational advocacy, which would be $7,436 per student. What I fought for is for your towns that have the lower tax base, because I don't want an income tax or a sales tax, and we will have that. How else do you propose to fund $536 million? Like my opponent said, he would like us to be a donor town. That's a tax. I took the pledge, no income tax, no sales tax. But what I did do to help you in Troy and Hinsdale and Richmond and Winchester is, if that judge's ruling went in at $536 million, each student from the state would get $7,436. Through my legislation that I championed, today, right now, without an income or sales tax, Troy is getting $9,818 per student. That judge's ruling would get you less money per student. Winchester's getting $10,477. Bedford is getting $7,400 per student. Richmond is getting $8,165. So I fought for my towns to get more because these towns have a lower population. I am the queen of property tax relief. If I did not fix that broken promise from the state of New Hampshire and return your money back to you, your Meals and Rooms revenue sharing, you would be in far worse shape. Donor towns are a tax. I will not support a tax. We do not want to lose the New Hampshire advantage. And by the way, when the judge made that ruling, he didn't take into account the other funding that the state is doing for education. For instance, we are giving extra dollars in the funding formula for special education based on the number of free and reduced lunch students and dollars for communities with extraordinary needs. This formula targets the state communities that need it the most. I will work very hard for you, as I have for 4 years, with a proven track record that's very positive. And I prefer to cross the aisle and work collaboratively. That's why I haven't been throwing stones. You know, the country, the world, the state is very divided. This isn't good for people. Who wants that? We should be doing what's right for the people. Why is that so hard? Just don't vote party politics. Vote what's right for the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As far as the funding goes, we really can't do too much until we get a ruling on the Claremont lawsuits. And in the interim, the legislature should be working on a way to fund it. But the big problem with everything is when you talk fair, what is fair? And when you put it out on a bill on paper, I'm quite sure that probably half of the people are going to disagree that it's fair. So that's the hard part. Start working now on how to do what we call fair, but we can't do anything until the lawsuit's settled. Thank you.
Oh my. So I'm always concerned when fair and taxation are in the same discussion. The fair is in Swansea in August. I served on the school board for a long time, and my kids went to school here. And there's kind of a thing that nobody's mentioned. Everybody in this room should know. New Hampshire has the most highly rated public schools in the entire country. So, somebody had to be number one, it was us. I made the observation decades ago that it was our staff and our teachers that held our school districts together. No, every teacher isn't perfect. Every building isn't properly funded. But at the end of the day, it's our teaching staff, and here, in my experience as a parent, we had very committed and very good people throughout the entire district. I want to mention homeschooling. At one point, my wife and I discussed the possibility of being a homeschooler, and we realized that we were not good enough parents or people to be homeschoolers. It takes a hell of a commitment. The Monadnock district, in my time as chairman, was not quite unique, but certainly unusual in the state of New Hampshire, because we reached out to homeschoolers to bring them in and offer them whatever facilities that we had that they wanted to use, which sounds like a real generous thing to do, except here's how it works. For every homeschooler we could account for in our district, we got federal and state money. So if they only used the library once a month, we got full funding. We've heard so much down here, I'm not 100% sure I remember what the underlying question was. Can you restate the question, Alan?
I asked how you would change the current school funding that nobody likes.
That nobody likes, yeah. Okay. So, I personally support the Claremont-Conval decisions. I think that if you look at every school district in this county, every school district in Sullivan County, they filed amicus briefs in favor, and they joined in that suit against the state. The argument that you're going to hear in the state house is, well, gee whiz, we don't have the money. Well, the reality is, and then we heard earlier, I don't remember who said it, but we should have the rooms and meals, the interest and dividends tax. Oh my God, we repealed that. Well, why? The state has a surplus. The state of New Hampshire has one of the highest bond ratings of any of the 50 states. The state of New Hampshire is one of the most solvent states. The state of New Hampshire is by no means broke. So, we are, to a certain extent, the victims of our own success. We want everything even better. The current funding formula, the challenge with the current funding formula is it is not broad-based enough. I agree with that, whoever said that. I believe that we should, from my perspective, living on this side of the state, we should be able to be beneficiaries of, if we're going to tax real estate in this state, which is what we do, we don't get as much as we should from the parts of the state that have large commercial and industrial developments. That's a fact. Over here, we have a couple of little stores, and it's funny because when you live in Cheshire County, you think of Keene as a big place with a lot of stuff. And when you go over to Concord and Manchester, they talk about, the little towns like Keene. So it's a very different perspective depending upon if you live in Ackworth with 350 other people, or you live in Keene with 20,000 people, or you live in, over there with millions of people. The challenge for school funding in New Hampshire, the real challenge to it isn't the money, it's the idea of local control. So we heard a proposal someplace down this line of, it should all be one from the state. Well, that is going to be really unpopular. In Cheshire County, we have a proliferation of SAUs. We have a proliferation of school districts. We actually have more school districts now than we did 20 years ago. We actually have more SAUs than we did 20 years ago. Every SAU has a superintendent and an assistant superintendent, and. So, do I agree that we should raise up the level? Yes. Is it going to happen anytime quickly or without a fight? No. And the only way it's going to happen is for a bipartisan, cohesive approach from the left-hand side of the state, which is where we live, to say, we all need to work on this together, or we're going to take something away from you that you don't like. At some point, they're going to want our votes. And it just has to be that plain and simple. You cannot continue to break everything down into the smallest possible part. So that's the challenge. The basic idea is fine. An income tax and a sales tax are not going to solve the school funding problem. They did not fund it in New Jersey, where I grew up. They did not fund it in Connecticut. They didn't fix it anyplace. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys for your answers on that. My question is going to be fairly simple. How would you tackle the issue with homelessness in the state? No, start there. I think you should come back and I'll have another question going in.
Okay. Boy, homelessness, that's a hard one. I don't think there is a quick and easy solution to it. I think it's, when you look at the homelessness issue, it has pushed its way from Massachusetts to Manchester to Keene to Troy, to Swansea certainly. I had the opportunity to interview one of the Senate candidates. He's a Democrat from Manchester, been a Manchester alderman for decades, great guy. And he said, you know, we took money from the feds to take care of our homeless shelter. But what that meant was we got homeless people, we had to take homeless people from Massachusetts as a priority over our own people. And the 100 Nights in Keene took money from the state to redevelop 100 Nights, which is a homeless shelter in Keene, and because they did that, then the Manchester homeless people got a priority over people from our area. And so the people who were on our area are back out on the street. So that's just how it worked, unfortunately. I think that there's a mental health crisis or emergency, and I think there is an employment crisis. I think back, if you look at the kind of things that they talked about during the Depression when millions of people were out of work, I think you need to give people a purpose, something to do besides sit around and feel bad about things, help them work their way out of whatever their situation is. I think you need to create a mechanism for re-engaging those people in society. And the economy is going to do that.
Thank you very much. I honestly don't know. I don't believe there is a simple answer to the question because, as mentioned, it's a very complex and there's numerous approaches that should be taken. The better economy will certainly help. One of the other problems we have is a lack of respect, which used to be taught in schools, but apparently isn't taught anymore. And I think that respect would be the key to helping almost everything. When you start respecting yourself and your neighbor, then you're more willing to help. And I don't have any answer on that one as to how we're going to bring back respect, but it certainly is a key to any civilization.
We put millions of funding for homeless, and I worked with my colleague from Keene, Senator Fenton, and we worked to increase the shelter rate. I voted for $50 million in affordable housing fund. These are all things that we've tried to do and work together to help this crisis that we're in. And we've made a little bit of a dent in it, and I am committed to continuing on making this progress going forward in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Well, I agree that this is certainly not a question that can be answered easily. And we do hear a lot about mental health crisis, but the problem is how do you actually define what a mental health crisis is? And one of the biggest issues that we've been tackling and trying to make legislation around is the fentanyl and the carfentanil situation that we have here in New Hampshire. And I can assure you that that drug is destroying our families. People are losing their homes. Now we have more and more children that do not have parents because they're dead to fentanyl. But yet, every time we try to address the fentanyl crisis, we're told that that's awful, that we can't hold those people, like that we can't put those people in jail. But you know who we can put in jail? The people that are giving fentanyl to our families that are creating homelessness. I can tell you that. Sorry, that's an issue for me. I apologize. I had the opportunity a few months ago to go and not only visit, but actually tour the entire New Hampshire border. And I can assure you what is happening up there is very, very real. 80% of people that cross into the New Hampshire border, after they're apprehended, are then taken and driven to the communities and told, good luck, best of luck to you. They don't have a job. They don't have the means of getting a job. And we certainly don't have a house to put them in. So I don't really know that there's a short-term solution. I think the answer that people probably want to hear is to build apartments, build housing. I personally know that my daughter graduated college and did not want to move into another block building. She wanted to move into a home. And I do know that around the country, after World War II, instead of building apartments everywhere and keeping people in rental entrapment, they actually built communities. And what they did is the government actually subsidized, that horrible word, government subsidy, loans for builders. And then that interest rate, that low interest rate, was then passed on to that particular family and that home buyer. Those homes today are being resold over and over and over again to first-time families. So I would like personally to see actual communities being built, not block buildings that keep people in situations where they're never going to be able to buy a house.
Well, I just want to share the conversation that I had this morning. The Executive Council and the Governor, they hired the Nashua Police Commissioners, which is kind of a unique role. So every once in a while, we have a meeting with the Nashua Police Chief and the police commissioners. And this morning, we discussed this homelessness issue. And this is the update that I got from him. Police Commissioner Tollner serves on the commission for homelessness. They're concerned about it in Nashua, but the situation's even worse in Manchester. And this commission has got together with landlords in Manchester. And then, well, first they surveyed to find out how many homeless they think they have. And they think they had 45 homeless in Manchester. They went to the landlords in Manchester and said, will you help with this problem? So far, in a very short time, they found 2 landlords that will each put up 2 homeless people in their buildings. So I think community involvement is part of the answer. I don't know what the whole answer is, but I did want to share that with what's going on in Manchester right now.
Thank you again for the question. I think one of the things we need to do, first of all, acknowledge that I agree with everybody. This is a very difficult problem. If it was easy to solve, it would have been solved by now. One of the things I think we are able to do is look around the country at other places that have had successful outcomes. I have read about Austin, Texas, that has a program of building basically micro houses that allow a homeless person to have a place they can sleep at night, they can lock their door, they can put their things there. And in that community, they also have services that are, mental health services that are nearby so that they can access them, barbershops, laundromats, things like that. The other thing I think we can do is make sure we continue to build out infrastructure that allows us to build greater density housing. So I think those are 2 issues, the 2 possible solutions to a homeless situation.
Thank you. Yes, also agree if it was easy, it would have been solved. I do think that we could improve mental health services for our homeless victims. I understand that we need 60,000 additional housing units by 2030 in order to serve the state of New Hampshire. For that reason, I think that we can afford to do and need to do both high density and situations like Maple Acres, which was built as a subsidized housing development. And as you all know, that was a very successful housing development, and those houses that were very affordable at the time, and they're now selling for very high prices. So more things like that. There are situations that will serve both people, and creating more housing, including situations like micro houses or tiny houses or accessory dwelling unit allowances would go really far in driving down the cost of housing and allowing more people to be able to afford it. And lastly, well, I guess that's it. I think that there's situations for both. I think things like the mill coming online will greatly, increase the number of houses, and that there's good situations for every type of person.
The studies that I've read that looked across the country of where the worst problems are with homelessness, it all points to a housing supply problem. If there isn't enough housing out there, people are going to be homeless. And I think in New Hampshire, as Kristen mentioned, we don't have enough units right now. So if our supply problem's there, we're going to have more homeless because just not enough units, and particularly not enough affordable units. So I think we need to do everything we can do to increase the number of affordable units. I know the number of bills in the legislature, the omnibus bill, to do a number of different things. I think we need to go further in that direction. I know the legislature looked at changes in some zoning ordinances, and I think maybe creating model ordinances. I'm on the planning board. It's not easy to go through the town ordinances and figure out, okay, how can we improve the supply of housing? How can we get housing starts accelerated? And I know in Troy we did a survey for the plan, and people want to maintain the rural atmosphere, and that makes sense. But there are ways, I think, to maintain the rural atmosphere and to get more housing. So we certainly could use help from the state in doing model ordinances and what would work and increase the housing supply. I think there were some proposals for taking money from the real estate transfer tax and increasing the affordable housing fund with the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. I think that's a good idea. Maybe do similar things with the CDFA and tax credits. But I think if we really address the housing supply and the affordability of it, that will really alleviate the homelessness problem.
All right, thank you very much. This next question is just to be a little easier on you guys. I know the crowd's gonna have some tough ones for you. So, what committees interest you and why? Start with you guys.
The Health and Human Service Committee is the committee that I'd want to be on. I've spent 35 years working on health and human service issues. As I mentioned, I was a division director for family assistance in New Hampshire, and after that, since then I've been working on evaluating, developing, researching health and human service programs. So across the board, it's definitely the committee that I would want to be on.
I would also be interested in serving on the Health and Human Services Committee. I was formerly an EMT, and it's in line with what I do for my career, and I think it would be really interesting.
This is an easier question, so thank you. Mine would be energy, because I think transitioning to a clean energy economy is going to be the most important thing that this state does. Transportation would be another one, because I spent my career in transportation as an airline pilot, and science and technology would be one. Thank you.
Well, the Executive Council doesn't generally have committees, so I'll take this question and tell you a little bit about what we do. Since New Hampshire is the only state that the executive branch is organized in the way it is. We don't have a lieutenant governor. We have 5 executive councils with 5 equal population districts. We act like the board of directors for a corporation with the governor being the chair of the board. So some of the things we do: if the state buys or sells or leases land, the executive council votes on that. We hold public hearings like we did here a few months ago on roads, highways, and bridges, and set those priorities for our transportation needs for the next 10 years. And then we're involved whenever there's eminent domain. A counselor will go out and take public information. We're the ones that confirm judges. We're the ones that decide whether Pam Smart stays in jail or she gets out. We hire the Attorney General, like in many states, they're elected. We also hire the Adjutant General for the Army National and Air National Guard. We appoint justices of the peace, notaries of the public. We confirm volunteers for all our boards and commissions. Any state borrowing goes through the Executive Council, and we give explicit scrutiny to contracts that are over $10,000, and virtually every dollar of the $12 billion plus budget is voted on by the Executive Council in one way or the other.
So thank you for the question. As I had mentioned earlier, I serve as the Vice Chairman of the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. And on my first term, after 6 months, the Speaker's office appointed me to be the Vice Chairman of the Executive Department's Administration Committee. And I can assure you, I think I cried every single day, to the point where he put me back on criminal justice only with the agreement that I would continue to serve on the Executive Department's Administration Committee. And additionally, I've substituted on many, many committees, and after every single time, I remember saying, I don't know who I made mad, but please don't ever do this to me again. So if you all elect me to go back and continue to be representative, I will very much advocate to continue being on the Criminal Justice Committee.
I am the chair for Senate Transportation. I had the honor and privilege of working on the 10-year plan and bringing millions of dollars back to the 13 towns that I represent for roads and bridges, and helping a family, a neighborhood in Bedford where I live, with a noise barrier problem. They were faced with the widening of the highway. They couldn't live and be outside. The noise was insurmountable. And I worked tirelessly for over a year to make them have a peaceful life in their home, because your home is your castle. I also am the Vice Chair of Commerce, which is very interesting. We get all kinds of bills, and that is what led me to fix the problem with prior authorization. I remember mentioning it to my colleagues that I wanted to take care of this, and they said, oh no, you can't do that. You're gonna have a bullseye on your back from the insurance carriers. And I said, well, I don't care, because this is not good for the people of New Hampshire. And so by bringing everybody together at the State House, giving everybody a seat at the table, it was a wonderful feeling to walk into Health and Human Services, which will be added to my committee's next session, and be able to walk in all in agreement and have that great legislation passed for more accessible and better health care. The other thing that is very important is water. This led me to take the lead on water. They call me the water warrior. I was able to, groundbreaking legislation get passed for the PFAS contamination. This will hold the polluters accountable. I also was recently in Humboldt to receive the award from the Granite State Rural Water as the Advocacy Legislator Champion of the Year for not only clean water, but water infrastructure and stormwater. We can't do affordable housing without the right water infrastructure. And I was able to secure $15.9 million and make a federal matching program that's gonna save taxpayers dollars and make it much easier to bring water to you. And I look forward to serving you the next 2 years. Thank you.
The county commission only has 3 commissioners, so it doesn't really matter about committees. You're involved in everything. So if elected, I could be involved in everything, and I would look forward to it.
So I serve on the Commerce Committee. Commerce, as only New Hampshire would do it, involves banking, insurance, marijuana, and liquor. There's money involved in some of those. And the Commerce Commission is pretty unique of the committees in the House. It is rare that the Commerce Committee in the House does not come out with a bipartisan result. Very candidly, I think that goes to the chairman, who is a Republican, and the vice chairman, who's a Democrat, but they work very hard to build consensus on the bills that we bring forward to the House. And sometimes it means everybody's a little bit unhappy, and sometimes it means everybody's really happy. So our bills typically come out where we've agreed on them. You get into the woods here with how the House works, but our bills don't typically wind up with big floor debates, other than marijuana. They typically wind up being a vote where it's by unanimous consent. They just come right out, they're taken care of at the beginning of the session. I want to address one thing, which hasn't quite come up yet. Marijuana legalization in this state, somebody said earlier, we're leaving a lot of money on the table, and I believe that that's a true statement. The House has passed, I believe, every year for 6 years has passed a bill to legalize it. Some of them were better, some of them were worse. The last bill we passed this last session, which I don't think was a particularly good bill, but was certainly seemed workable, came back modified from the Senate to such an extent that the majority of members of the House would no longer approve it. And so that's happened. You know, there's issues around all of these things. And the question prior to this one, I want to say one little thing about, and I'll get off the mic. It kind of morphed into a question from homelessness to how do we fix housing, which they're good questions. Keep in mind that in New Hampshire, in the last 4 years, the population has increased by 30%. And New Hampshire, in the last 20 years, has had a de facto moratorium on building houses. Because you couldn't because of starting with the savings and loan crisis in 1989, which seems like a long time ago to some of you, I'm sure, up until 2 or 3 years ago, you couldn't build at $200 a square foot. It cost $200,000 to build a 1,000 square foot ranch house, but you could buy a 1,000 square foot ranch in Keene, in Maple Acres, for $145,000. So why the hell would you build one? You wouldn't. That's the problem. The underlying problem in New Hampshire is we're the victims of our own success. Where did all those people come from? They came here because we have a strong economy. They came here because we have a very desirable tax structure by other people's standards. They came here because we have good schools. And therefore, we now have more people here than we ever bothered to build houses for because we never thought they were coming. Everything that everybody said about that's true, and it pushes the poorest and the least ability to care for themselves to the bottom and out. And I think that's a big portion of the housing, homelessness crisis.
It's like we're done with questions.
Yes, for now we are.
It's 7:52. Want to take a 5-minute recess? You guys good? Okay, just want to make sure. All right, so public come up, ask questions. I'll do one question time per person. And again, it'll be directed towards all members. Just line up. Please state your name when you ask the question.
Very nice, Steve.
Hi, my name is Steve Sawyer. You all touched on, this is one thing you all agree on. There is a housing shortage, okay? And, you know, when I read in the Keene Sentinel that Concord is coming out with new housing regulations, I really take offense to that. Because Jack, Kyle, Mike, Richard, we all work very hard on the planning board. And we're all very liberal. I think Troy is very liberal. You can build a ADU by right, a duplex by right. So when Concord says you're gonna have to allow trailers and areas, we had a housing seminar on this, and the overwhelming consensus was that we don't want them. We have trailer parks, and we also had a referendum on town ballot, which was defeated. So I think the way to handle it is, Dick had a very good point. You need to subsidize them. Our son and daughter-in-law are building a house. They own the land, they have a well and septic. They got a quote, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And if you know my son, he's frugal as anything. $600,000. Is that affordable? No. You need to get subsidies for people, and you need to make it affordable. Like I said, up on Richmond Road, we have 2 acres of land for sale, $100,000. Even before you put a shovel in the ground. Is that affordable? No. No matter what the problem, no matter who's driving the cost, I think Concord needs to allow local control. And Troy is very liberal, like I said. Thank you.
Can I answer? What was a specific question? Just so we're clear on me.
So would any of you dictates to the town what we have to do as far as zoning? And you brought up about water. Up in New London, 100-unit apartment building. It's ready to go. Oops, we don't have water. We don't have water here.
Right.
So, you know, we know our town. We know our towns. We know areas that can, you know, we have water resource protection in town. And, oh, and by the way, the executive committee, $600 million for a prison for 1,500 beds. That's $400,000 a bed. How about taking that money and giving it to New Hampshire Housing Authority, divvying it up? Thank you.
I think everybody gets a chance to respond. I got the mic. There had been Steve's concern, as I understand it, is a concern that I have, that it has been a bipartisan bad solution, in my opinion, that we've heard kicked around the legislature, which is basically top-down zoning. And we had a couple of bills on that. I voted against them. There was a bill to allow a 4-unit by right, meaning no matter what the town zoning was, you could take a single-family house and convert it into a 4-unit. Now, I guess if you have a well and septic, maybe that works, but if you're in Troy right now, you're not gonna get a whole lot of those. That's a big problem. I think Steve's point's a very valid one. We know in the small towns on this side of the state, we know what's going on. We know what's appropriate for our town and not appropriate for our town. And personally, I strongly object to top-down zoning. I think it's a mistake. I think all the enabling legislation that allowed towns to have zoning was a good thing. But I think that we don't want it, it's been described as a housing crisis, and what it really is a housing emergency. We had a huge spike in our population with no preparation and very little flexibility. And to suddenly change the way everything is done in our towns is a tragic mistake, and I think you would wind up with a very undesirable result. So I agree with your concern. I have voted against that very issue at least twice.
I was a former town councilor. I think I may have mentioned that earlier on. And so I absolutely believe in local control. And up there in Concord, I always vote for local control because I believe you know your town best and you know how to make the decisions for your town. But one of the things that I've seen that's creating a lot of the problem is in May, I went with some of my colleagues up to the northern border, and it was very eye-opening talking to the troopers and the chiefs of police, and there was a family that owns a farm right at the border. So it's a very little stream. I mean, I actually could walk right across it. And actually, I've never been to Canada before, so when my phone said, Verizon said, welcome to Canada, I had to smile a bit. But the problem is very serious, and there are crossings of illegal immigrants. And one of the ladies she was bathing her kids, and her husband said there's been a sighting, and he was trying to get in the house, and she was terrified. And he told his wife, get your gun. Fortunately, the trooper was right there. So what I learned is Massachusetts, being a sanctuary state, really became a magnet for illegal immigrants. And it almost bankrupted Massachusetts in 2 months. Now, my husband's from Italy. Legal immigration, I'm all for that. But I want people to be vetted, because we have to think about our housing, our homeless, our safety, and I think it's contributing to the housing problems. I also know that Massachusetts came to realize that it was costing them $1 million, and it almost bankrupted them, and so they put a stop to it. And what I'm afraid of is we are a very, very small state, and if we were to be a sanctuary state, what would happen to us? And it would bankrupt us. In fact, some of you may not know this, but our Attorney General, John Formella, had to file a lawsuit against our current administration because they were trying to force us here in New Hampshire to give illegal immigrants free health care. We can't afford that. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So I'm definitely not in favor of top-down, bottom-up zoning. And I think it's been mentioned here, we did have a bill that came in front of the House, and it was to allow, I believe it was, 4 ADUs by right. In my opinion, that is an absolute disaster. So I do understand that people want to make their homes into duplexes, all right? That's always up for discussion. But what was interesting is the person that wrote the committee report that thought that was such a great idea actually wrote that this was a modest improvement and a modest adjustment to solve the problem. That person, like so many in Concord, live on the other side of 93. They have absolutely no idea, just no idea what life is like out here. And I do know that every one of the towns I represent have voted not once, not twice, but I think at least 3 times on their ballots, and have all said no. They've said no to the demands in these absolute demands in zoning changes. So if they continue to come, I'm going to continue to vote no and leave it up to you guys to decide.
Well, again, I don't get to write legislation, but I would like to share a story and also remind everybody that we've had 22% inflation in the last 4 years. That's a 22% rise in the cost of housing and the labor to build those houses. Printing money in Washington and making it worth less has got to stop. That's part of the solution that can be done there. But I also want to share a story about government overreach. Our family is building a house in Wilton for a young family who has a couple of kids, currently living in a mobile home, and they want to take a step up. And they're a friend of the family, so we're doing this for an extra cost for them. But the regulations in the town of Wilton on the driveway alone have cost them $30,000 more than it should have. The fire chief in Wilton wants the driveway to be 24 feet wide. The road that serves the driveway is only 23 feet wide. They want slopes shallower than the slopes on the public roads. And this has cost this family $30,000. So I like to, one solution is to look at that government overreach, take a look at your regulations, make sure they're reasonable, and then go for there and make sure that we can build housing affordably.
Okay, thank you. I'll just try and focus on your question. I also agree that Concord shouldn't do zoning from all the way top-down zoning like they've talked about. I do think one thing they can do up there, though, is set some boundaries. And the thing that you want to try and prevent is towns from doing the not in my backyard syndrome, where they try and over-restrict everything. So that would be one of the things I would like to allow Concord to do, but generally I agree with you. Top-down zoning should not be allowed.
What is top-down zoning?
Concord telling everybody what the zoning rules would be.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Local control is good. I do think that going back to the state welching on some of the monies that they had promised from previous tax revenue, they could assist rural towns with improving their infrastructure, their water and sewer treatment plants, in order to promote more affordable housing. The state tax policies can be written to encourage housing and incentivize certain zoning, especially for the towns that are far more restrictive than Troy.
Yes, as I said earlier, I think maybe the state could develop model ordinances, best practices, technical assistance to the planning boards. I think that would be helpful. I am afraid, though, if with the not in my backyard, that the more affluent communities, the more restricted communities, the affordable housing is not going to be there. So somehow we have to either incentivize, as you said, set up some structures. If we're going to meet the housing demand, we're somehow going to have to strike the right balance. Don't want to be top down, but we don't want to just continue with the status quo. So there's got to be some creative solutions. It's a hard problem.
Anyone else have questions for the members?
If we're down to the end, I have one last thing. Would you please raise your hand if you are willing, right here and right now, to pledge that you will not support any effort, that you will oppose any effort to implement either an income tax or a sales tax upon the people of New Hampshire?
Took the pledge.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Anyone else in the public have questions? Seeing none? Yep.
I don't know if it's a comment or a question, but I'm just I'm a retired, Debbie Sawyer. I'm a retired public school teacher, and it just hasn't sat right with me throughout the whole meeting with our conversation about education. I understand that you've had a very successful time homeschooling your children. There was a time in New Hampshire when homeschool parents had to have a certified teacher sign off on their portfolio at the end of their academic year. There was a family in our town who knew I was a working teacher and asked me to please certify their 3 daughters' portfolios. In the first year, I did, and I gave her a few suggestions on how to increase the level of academic achievement for her students. By the time the second year rolled around, her one daughter in 5th grade was easily 2 years behind the 4th graders that I was then teaching. And I could no longer put my name to that certification. So I think when you talk about homeschooling families, there's very successful families at homeschooling, and there are those who are very unsuccessful at homeschooling. If you've brought so much money to our schools, 9,000 something or another for students in Troy. Why do my grandchildren never take a field trip? Why do my grandchildren not have foreign language? Whereas where I taught in Keene, foreign language started in, I think now they might even be down to 2nd grade. They've lowered a grade each year. Why in Keene, just 12 miles up the road, do kids start strings in 3rd grade, and my fifth grade grandson has yet to get an instrument in his hands? They're not offered. I mean, maybe you're bringing 9,000 per student, but then you're giving freedom accounts to take students out of the school. So it doesn't matter if we have 9,000 per student, if we've got less students now. And as far as kids that get an out-of-district placement, generally it's not from one elementary school to another district. Generally it's to a specialized school because they have special needs. And the districts are required federally to pay for those schools, those programs. I'm such a strong public school proponent, that I don't know that you would ever change my opinion by saying freedom accounts are choices. Parents have choices to do all sorts of things with their kids after hours if they want. It seems to me I went through and I looked at all the private schools in the Cheshire County area, and I called them all up to try and find out what their tuition rates were. One, Pioneer Valley something, was $3,000. St. Joe's was in the middle at about $7,500. There were some schools for $14,500. And if you're giving families an average of $5,000, it's not the poor families who are going to make up that $9,000 difference in tuition. It's the wealthy families who are already decided to have their kids go to private school that get that extra money. Poor families can't even transport their kids to those other schools. So I don't really, you have not convinced me that EFAs work for the regular kid who goes to school in Troy. I don't see it. I don't see my grandkids benefiting from it. And what I taught in Keene, what they get there is so much more than what our students get here. And it is quality of teacher. Quality of teacher makes a huge difference. But, you gotta pay them.
Can I have the mic? I have a couple of just school board things.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Well, yeah, sure. So, this is sort of a long-standing thing between Keene and Monadnock. So, when Richard played football and they had the Turkey Bowl between Keene and Monadnock, which they would frequently do on Thanksgiving Day, and if Keene lost for 2 years in a row, then they wouldn't do it for 6 years. I always said, well, the Monadnock band would show up. Where was the Keene band? Oh, Keene doesn't have a band. Keene has an orchestra. So some of this is it's true. No, they didn't when Richie was in school. No, they told me no. The parents were very clear, and some were mad about it. So maybe they got one.
They have a jazz band, they have I don't know if they have a marching band.
Well, they didn't have a marching band. But anyway, that's what I was told. Between the two school districts, you would find, Norman Evans told me 35 years ago, if you want your kid to learn French in the 2nd grade, this isn't the right school. And I think it has to do less with funding than a desire on the people who are in the school district to have that occur. Whether it's a lack of understanding, a lack of motivation, it's just not the culture here. That's the difference between between Monadnock and Keene. In my 2 decades on the school board here, not once did I ever hear anyone talk about bringing foreign languages in the elementary school. Now, Where I went to school in New Jersey, elementary school, I can tell you, we had the choices of 3 languages, French, German, or Spanish, starting with the 3rd grade. But that's just not how it is here. I mean, I know you guys as parents put a lot of time into pushing a lot of this stuff. I mean, and I don't think I think you were right to do that, but sometimes you're sweeping sand on the beach. It's not because of funding here. It's because nobody ever bothered to want the majority of people simply didn't place value in that. You know, learning Spanish in the 7th grade is good enough. That's not my opinion. That is the opinion which we were presented with both at the school district level.
First of all, thank you for your service as a teacher. I love our teachers. I substitute taught for many years in Bedford School District. And in my first term, it was Senate Bill 130, and that was what was the education savings accounts or whatever. So I don't make decisions until I talk to the people that can be part of the process. So I talked to my school board superintendents, and I talked about, what do you think about this education savings account? And they told me their concerns, and so then I heard from parents that could not afford to move their children, and it brought tears to my eyes. They were being bullied. If their child didn't move, they wouldn't thrive. So then I said, well, I think I can support this program, but I'm going to put an amendment in that is 350% of the poverty level, because I wanted low-income families to be able to move and have the same opportunities as more affluent families. And that is where the bill stands now. It's 350% of the federal poverty level to be able to use or get those funds. Also, a lot of people aren't aware that it had a transition rate. So to protect and help the public school adjust, the public school, for any student who left, would get 100% of the funding the first year, 75% for the second, and 25% for the third. It's a small percentage compared to the funding that we are doing for public education. And I just feel like you're only in 4th grade once. And maybe there's lots of things we can do to fix what's lacking for these kids that feel they need to move. But if you're only in 4th grade once, I can't let you fall through the cracks. So I figured this was a common sense, balanced approach to this problem. So I hope that helps you with your question.
Yeah. Go ahead if you want.
So thank you for the question, and I would also like to thank you for your honesty. Maybe we are not going to agree. Maybe this is something that we're just going to have to agree to disagree. With that being said, you are correct, but there's also more to it. Some of the children, they go to the out-of-district placements, yes. Some of those children go up to Keene, up to Cedar Crest. Some of them are going out of district because of behavioral situations. Some of them are home situations that have absolutely nothing to do with the school whatsoever. But as I mentioned before, for whatever reason, that particular building is not working for them. It's just not. And as sad as this is, I met with a young girl that was in high school that was allegedly sexually assaulted, and it's unfortunate that all of the children in the school that knew about it picked sides. And it got to be where she simply could not go into the building any longer. So she now has the opportunity to go to a school that she's able to go and learn and still continue getting an education. Without that, she probably would have dropped out, and that would have been the end of it. So I am very much a supporter of the fact that an education that is best for a child is the education that's best for the child. Not a particular building that people want to advocate for is the only place that person can receive an education. And most of the people that I know that have pushed back on this new program, most of them are now sending their children to a different school than their actual home school where they started. So it clearly is working because many, many families in New Hampshire have taken advantage of it. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you for your question. I think you spoke it so eloquently, much better so than I think I did earlier. My wife was a public school teacher for 27 years, so I get your viewpoint on what it's like to be a teacher and see the funding go to different places. The EFAs, I think, are a disaster for public schools. Right now there's an income limit of 350% of the federal poverty level, but every legislative session they try to increase that limit. In the last session they even tried to make it no limit. So another thing that they never do is they never double check the income of the parent after they are in the program. Once you're in forever. So the fact that these grants fade away just tells you that over time money will continue to be siphoned out of the public schools, and it just creates a downward spiral for public school funding. So I think you are fully correct in your assessment of the program. Thanks.
Yeah, also thank you for being a teacher. And I'm very glad that your homeschool situation was successful and that you have successful grown children. But I do believe that there should be standards for student achievement, and that there are children likely falling through the homeschool cracks without it.
Yeah, Debbie, thank you. I agree with your assessment as well. I'm a proponent of public schools as well. I think public funds, public schools, I don't support EFAs. Of course, people should have choice and go outside the school system, but whoever goes outside the school system, there needs to be accountability to their education standards.
And there should be accountability for where the money is spent, because from what I understand, there's little to no understanding or oversight as to how the dollars are being spent from the Education Freedom accounts.
Now I can talk.
And 2/3 of the people who are earning a base were already in private schools.
There is definitely an accountability system for the money. The parents usually are getting reimbursed for curriculum and other school items. They could buy a microscope, for instance. They could buy that instrument with their Education Freedom accounts. They have to submit all that. The Executive Council is the one that hires the people that oversee the Educational Freedom accounts. And homeschoolers do have accountability. In my grandchildren's case, they're reporting directly to the Department of Education. So homeschoolers do have oversight. It's not true that they don't, and it's not true that Education Freedom accounts money is not watched, and it was just recently audited. We made some tweaks to that first time out there, but it's run very smoothly, and the money is going where it's supposed to go.
Any other questions from the public? Seeing none, I think we're done. I want to thank everyone that came out, both the public and the candidates. Sorry. Oh, yeah, closing, sorry.
Pick an end and do a closing.
Who's got the microphone? Though?
It's right in the middle.
We've really got to work on getting the standard, so we'll work on that next year. Well, I'd like to thank you all, everybody that came out this evening, all the participants for coming out and having a civil conversation. Over the last 2 years, I have absolutely proven to be an effective leader. I have sponsored 2 bills this session that have both been signed into law by the governor. HB 97, which strengthened our violation of privacy laws, and HB 1260, which closed the loopholes if the victim of a violation of privacy was a minor. And that is, if that were to happen now, the perpetrator will at least face minimal a felony conviction for the first offense. Both of those bills had bipartisan support and passed out of the committees and out of both the House and Senate on unanimous voice votes. Hearing the pleas of our law enforcement officers, the chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee and myself, we authored a comprehensive bail package that again passed out of the committee unanimously and also on the House floor unanimously. What I'm most proud about with that bill is it was an absolute dedication of compromise. When we started that discussion, exactly one half of our committee said there was no problem whatsoever. No problem whatsoever. And because of the disastrous bail reform that was passed in 2018, we were seeing people, repeat offenders, walk and walk and walk. We are taught bad people that were doing bad things to people were getting out, zero bail whatsoever. We put an end to that. Additionally, I continue to update all the towns in the selectmen, and because of that, the town of Richmond is now able to enjoy the broadband access. They were having trouble accessing the funding that they were told that they would be able to receive. And I also have helped to champion the bill through the committee that is going to help protect our New Hampshire covered bridges. That was a bipartisan effort with my colleague over in Swansea. And I will continue to listen to you. I will continue to answer questions. I will even continue to answer the email where I was called a horrible, horrible, derogatory female part. You know what? I answered that email. Didn't answer the postcard because the State House security took it. But the point is I'm actually here to listen. If you are willing to have a conversation, I'm willing to do that with you. So I'm asking you to vote me back in November, and I really do enjoy serving you, so I'm looking forward to continue doing that. Thank you very much.
These last 4 years have truly been an honor to serve you. I definitely earned my $100 a year for my 100 hours a week that I represent you. I have been very, very present in all 13 of my towns. I personally read every email and I answer every single person. I'm not a politician, I am truly a public servant. I have been coined the bipartisan legislator because I want to do what's right for the people. And that's what is needed. I told you how much money is coming back for the meals and rooms. I told you about making health care more accessible. I've told you about what I've done for children, families, with Momnibus. I'm working on Momnibus 2.0. There's so many things I've done in these last 4 years, and I humbly have been rewarded for them by making your lives better and improving the quality of your life here in New Hampshire. And I want to continue to do that. Families are struggling, inflation is high. I am the queen of taxpayer relief. I'm working on 2 other additional bills, hoping that we'll have the surplus that will return money back to cities and towns and really help you with your property tax. I knock on hundreds of doors. That's how I draft my legislation, because I listen to you and what's concerning you. And over again, I hear economy, inflation, property taxes. I was awarded the Social Justice Champion by ABLE New Hampshire for families with disabilities. I sponsored a bill that would be a study committee to figure out what can we do to help families with disabilities live more independently. And only by the second meeting, I already realized that there were some ARPA funds that could be used. And I secured $910,000 to build the first ever independent living place for families with disabilities. Very proud of that. I was given the award Legislator of the Year from the BIA, Legislator of the Year for the work for moms and families and children from New Futures, and many, many other awards for doing the right thing for the people. I have an open door policy. Everyone has my cell phone, and I'm here for you anytime that you need me. I appreciate your vote on November 5th. I'd like to continue to serve you for the next 2 years. I am so grateful. And again, remember, this is not my seat, it's your seat. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming out tonight. I do appreciate you listening. I would appreciate your vote also. I'm experienced, 9 years on the city council. I know how the system works. I have an interest in the common person. I pay my taxes. I've worked as an electrician and electrical assembler. And I'm able to compromise when necessary. However, I'd like to make sure that both sides of an argument are discussed fully. And I'd be willing to do that for you. And if you would just consider it, I would greatly appreciate your vote. Thank you.
So, I like Jack Gettins, is a good guy. He makes really very nice apple champagne cidery stuff. That was cool. I recommend it.
Free drinks for everybody.
It's free. So, that being said, we have different perspectives. I'd be lying to you. I'm a conservative. I believe that you as an individual have the greatest ability to determine what is best for you and your family. When I see that the state has a surplus, I don't think we should think of new and interesting ways to spend it. I think we should think of new and interesting ways to not take that money, because whether it's the housing situation or schools, individuals consistently throughout history allocate funds and capital within society more effectively than the state. There is nothing worse. Well, there are worse things. The best example of government intervention and overreach and mismanagement is the Soviet Union. I mean, some of us are here old enough, I'm 68, I think most of us are getting close to that where you remember the Soviet Union. They fell apart because they micromanaged everything. Everything started from the state. They had price controls. So the good news, bread's only 25 cents a loaf. The bad news, we only have 25 loaves of bread and there's 10,000 people. When you get out of here, you want to Google something called a Khrushchev. It's a kind of housing unit. Because when Khrushchev took over, there was a housing crisis in the Soviet Union. So they built housing blocks. They're still there. They're dreadful. In the 50s and 60s. It's not what you want. It's not, as Americans, what you want. It's not how you want to live. And the farther we get from government intervention in our day-to-day lives, the farther we can keep ourselves as a state and as a community, the happier and more prosperous we are all likely to be. And so, that's my perspective. I think I've tried to do a good job. I am absolutely open to suggestions, and I have always, before I vote on any issue, my consideration is always consider the possibility that what you know is an error and what you think may be wrong. So, that's my part.
We got one.
So thank the town of Troy for this event and the candidates. I think it was a really good discussion. Obviously, lots of different opinions, which is good. I hope you consider voting for me. Be really committed to the position. I've worked on public policy and health and human services for 35 years, so I really enjoy it, and I would enjoy bringing that to the legislature and representing you. Like Denise, I've knocked on a lot of doors, and it's really important to talk to people and get their perspectives and finding out what's going on the planning boards, Monadnock's Regional School Budget District Committee. So you learn from every perspective, and I'd be really committed to doing that. So I'd be very thankful and appreciative of your vote, and look forward to, if I get elected, obviously being in contact about the public policy and talking about it and working with you all on that. So thank you very much.
Thanks again, everybody, for coming out. Even though we're getting taxes back to municipalities, it's a fraction of what the state originally promised. And our property taxes are filling that void. So I feel I care very deeply about Troy and the towns of Cheshire County and the towns in District 17. And I'd really like to represent, and I'd really appreciate your support.
Thank you again to the selectmen for hosting this event tonight and for everybody who's coming out. Again, the reason I'm running is I'm going to reiterate some of the things I said in my opening remarks. I think the policies of the New Hampshire Republican Party are just too extreme. I think they've had 4 years of showing that. They're in lockstep, I think, with Project 2025, with the projects, things that come out of the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, etc. A lot of the money that they've talked about probably spending tonight has been federal money. And so they really should be thanking Annie Custer and Chris Pappas and Maggie Hassan and Jean Shaheen and Joe Biden. And the last thing I'm going to say is, when I ended my service in the military, I remember looking at my wife and saying, this is the most important job that I will ever have in my life. It's the most job with the most sense of purpose. Well, if I get elected on November 5th, I think this job may come in a very, very close second place. So again, I'd ask for your support on November 5th, and again, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Like I said in my opening statement, one of the main jobs of the council is to be the guardian of the treasury. And I wanted to say, I think we're doing that job very well. With the help of the legislature, we're going to spend the money that they appropriated as wisely as possible. And I think the legislature has been doing a great job. We have had a $300 million rainy day fund, the highest money we've had in the rainy day fund in a long time. Why is that important for the state of New Hampshire to have an emergency fund? Because we don't have a sales or income tax. And the bonding agencies like to know that we have enough cash on hand to get through the valleys should and when they come. So for the first time in 40 years, our bond rating has been increased to AA+, because we spent wisely and we have the reserves that we need to weather storms. I'd also like to say that, you know, the council sees many, many different contracts. One of the ones we turned down that we didn't think was a good use of your public money is $4 million for photographers to take pictures of the state of New Hampshire and then give them to the travel and tour industry to use for their advertising. When we turned down that money, lo and behold, the emails came flying in of professional photographers volunteering to do it for free just to help the state of New Hampshire. We also have little things. We had the manager of Cannon Mountain Ski Area put 18,000 personal miles on his state car. We stopped that when we found out about that. So I would also say that we've put in $2 million into our northern border to coordinate with all the law enforcement agencies into our northern border. We take our northern border very seriously. We also, and maybe you could help Troy, but we also have put out a lot of drinking water grants to improve water infrastructure. Maybe that could help Troy, and maybe we need to have a conversation about that later and see what we can do about that. Anyways, we may disagree about a few things. I get very passionate about my Second Amendment rights, and I get very passionate about education freedom for the children in the state of New Hampshire. I would like to see all options for those children on the table, including funding for public schools. So even though we disagree, I want to point out that I'm here and my opponent isn't. I'm here to hear from you, and I hope that you would consider re-electing me on November 5th.
Thank you. So I believe we're done for tonight. I do want to thank Bob Norton for setting up all the chairs and tables for tonight. And thank you for all the public that came out.